Hi folks, welcome to Set Apart Homestead. I'm Travis, and so the video I made the other day about FEMA, man, seems to be a hot topic and a lot of people have opinions about it and questions. So I thought that maybe I would make another one, although that's not really what I, intend for the focus of this channel to be. But I do have a little bit of information or knowledge, not directly with FEMA. Had one guy did the all caps yelling at me that I was some FEMA agent. I've never worked for FEMA. But the type of training that I received is it's the same training that many in the military and law enforcement, those of us, that's been in, you get this kind of training. And it doesn't even necessarily come from FEMA. I was trained actually at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. The people that was training us, they weren't even, in the military. They probably were at some point. They were contractors, U.S. contractors. The training was developed and probably mostly funded by the Department of Homeland Security. Sorry, I'm all tongue-twisted. So, I guess you could say indirectly that FEMA wasn't even really a part of it, but the training was how to deal with mass evacuations, mass emergencies that of course FEMA would generally direct on the ground. So I was never an employee of FEMA. And this is just in training that many people, like I said, military, law enforcement, firefighters even, especially like county level emergency management directors and people like that, a lot of them go through this type of training. So just kind of clearing that up. What I wanted to talk today, though, this is one that I actually have not seen too many people over the last several years talk about this. And there may be those that's just going to say that I'm nuts or that I don't know what I'm talking about, but I this is part of the things that we trained on and the things that the information they were giving us. First off, FEMA camps aren't going to look like what you think a FEMA camp is going to look like. Don't go around looking for a large prison facility surrounded by fencing and concertina wire and guard shacks and posts and everything. And maybe some of those exist, but that's not necessarily what they're going to look like. They are going to look like your local school, college, hospital, church, and sometimes like vacant Walmarts or grocery stores, because that's what they generally are. Now, before I get any further, we talked about in our training that those types of facilities would be what we would use immediately in a situation where people had to be quarantined, decontaminated, medically treated, evacuated, whatever. And then if it looked like it was going to be a long-term situation, then they might actually set up at another location an actual quarantine facility where people could be moved to. But so it's not necessarily talking about a prison, and that's where they kind of get you. Is they're using facilities that already exist. And one of the things that we trained in, we did a training at a small community hospital, at a small community college, and at a church. But one of the things that just kept catching my thoughts when I was going through this training, because give you a little, I was already aware of what was going on in the world and the government at this time. This was the job that I was doing, but I was, this wasn't the thing that woke me up. I was already woke. They kept talking about how it was very important to work with local churches. That while other places like a school or a hospital would definitely work, that a church would be the best. And the reason is that whether you're religious or not, the local church is a place that the majority of the population would feel safe going to. It's just something that's kind of ingrained in our thoughts as Americans and stuff. I mean, think of, old movies like Zorro and Robin Hood and stuff. They would hide out at the church, gangster movies. They'd hide out at the church, and the priest or the preacher would kind of protect them. There's this idea that there's safety in a church, that you can go there and you don't have to worry about bad guys or the government or anything else. You're safe. And they actually talked about that people would feel more safe if they had to be forced to leave their homes and evacuated, that they would feel more comfortable going to a church, whether they were a Bible believer or not. And so to try to work with local churches to get them to ahead of time agree that their buildings, that their facility could be used for a quarantine area. And so that was something that was a big deal. They talked about it a lot. After the training, and this was actually a couple of years later, the area that I was living at the time, the county emergency management held a meeting with the local, they had the council of churches, pretty much every church in the area was a member, and that's what they were doing, is setting up, designated churches for these. And Department of Homeland Security, and this isn't some conspiracy, you can go right on their website and find all this information out. They don't hide it or anything. That they have programs for faith-based organizations, which means churches. And you can actually, if you're a church, you can receive funding from them to, basically have your facility as a, emergency facility. They will train your people in what to do in emergencies, natural disasters, live shooter events, things like that. They will provide not just physical training, but they can provide, computer software to help you do that. But and of course, like I said, funding, actual physical dollars. But it all comes at a price. What they don't usually tell, at least up front, is that they're wanting information about your facility. They're wanting information about your membership. There was a church, and this has been years ago, where I used to live. It was one of these big mega churches, and they implemented this program. They were the first church in that area that I knew of that implemented this program. And I went to that church. Someone I knew, there was something going on, and I knew someone that I think their kid was in a play. I don't remember exactly why I went, but I was invited to go, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll go. And I go in, and of course it's just this massive building. And I think they dropped their kids off at like the Sunday school area. And I noticed when they did that, they had this little scanner, and almost not really an ATM, almost like where you'd swipe your credit card. And they put their thumbprint down, and then they touched the screen and everything. I'm like, what in the world is that? And what it is that's how they check their kids in. So, you attend church there, you want your kids to go to Sunday school or their children's ministries. And I get it that it's a big church and there's thousands of people that go there, so they have to have security. It's not like a church that's got 20 people. It increases the liability for the church because there's so many kids there. So I understand the security aspect, but beforehand, before your children are allowed to attend any of their children's services, you have to sign them up. They get your driver's license information, personal information, and then they set you up an identification where you scan your thumb. And it scans your thumbprint, and basically you just go over there and scan it, and it registers that your kid's there. And when you, at the end of the service, you come to pick them up, you scan, and it proves that it's you, and it's not someone else impersonating you. They also had like a kiosk where you could scan in that you're attending that day. That that's how they kept track of attendance. I can't remember if they did at the time, but I believe that it did eventually develop where you could pay tithes, offerings or whatever to the church by scanning in and having your bank account information and transferring X amount of dollars. Now, I can't for sure say that church was allowing DHS access to their membership. But I do know that that's some of the things that were being talked about at the time of my training, that's what they were working on developing, is where they would offer assistance to churches in return that they basically got access to their membership. And so this is, what they're doing. So, don't think, and I'm not trying to, terrify people. I'm just telling you the things that I know, that I experienced in training. They want to work with churches, mostly. That was the information, or that's the feeling we were getting, because they kept talking about that. Schools work, hospitals work, especially hospitals. If you're sick, you've been coming to some contaminant, you probably gonna go to a hospital. They come in and they lock the facility down. They do, not the church, not the hospital, not the school. The people, which would have been my role, whether it's military, law enforcement, local agencies. They come in and they lock every door, padlock it, chain it, and there's only one way in and one way out, and they control that access. And so it's something to think about. I hear a lot of people, I've never seen a FEMA camp anywhere, because they're not going to look like a camp. They look like local facilities. As a person that tries to be prepared, I don't necessarily think that's the most likely scenario for me. I think it is a possible scenario. I had a video a day or two ago about the electrical grid, the potential for that to, be attacked or to collapse. And I think that's a much more likely scenario, in my personal opinion. We have a very fragile electric grid, and our enemies know that. And, short of multiple nuclear attacks, bombs being dropped, I don't think that there would be anything more devastating to us. If our grid completely went down, it would knock us back to the Middle Ages, or even worse, because everything, depends upon our electrical grid. So in my mind, that's something that I concern myself with more when looking at major national, disasters and things like that. But the possibility of, a terrorist attack, a biological attack, a pandemic, things like that, where people could be, find themselves in a quarantine type area or a mass evacuation, it is, a possibility. It is something that they train for, that they, do focus on. It's not FEMA that necessarily is, directing it. They're just going to be the ones on the ground that's kind of coordinating those efforts when they're happening. Usually it's through DHS, which is over FEMA. But anyways, I just wanted to bring that out, that, be cautious. If you're a churchgoer, of course I'm not saying don't go to church. As you probably figured out, I'm a ardent believer of Christ and the Bible. But be cautious of what your church might be getting into, because it's they, like with most things with the government, they're wrapping it in a nice package for you. They'll come to your church and say, hey, and it may not be on a federal level. Like I said, it could be your local level, county emergency management could be the ones coordinating that. And they're going to, wrap it in a nice package, but it always comes at a cost. There's no freebies from the government. They just don't happen. Everything comes at a cost. And before anything is said, I'm not against law enforcement and military or firefighters. Not at all. Or emergency management people. Not at all. Most of those guys and gals are wonderful people, and they truly join up or get hired or whatever for, wanting to serve their communities or serve their nation. But it's the politics at the top. That's why I mostly got out of all of it, as I got sick and tired of the politics. I wanted to serve and protect That was my desire, and the politics just got to a point that it nauseated me. But anyways, getting kind of off track. The point is that be cautious if you're a churchgoer, if you're, your local community building, because it may not be a church. It could be your local community building. Those types of facilities. That's where they're going to look for first. Something like a Walmart that's empty, vacant, and they may already own. That might be the more permanent facility that they would, transfer people to. But the initial, quarantine areas, there's going to be multiple ones. If you live in a city, average size, mid-sized city, or whatever size, and they're not busing every one to one central location. It's too much. So there's going to be multiple ones. We would talk about breaking up towns into different districts. In this district, it's this hospital, and over here, it's this church, and this one, it's this school. That's the kind of that thing that was going on. And again, this type of training, I don't know if it still is. I've been out of it for a while. This all was after 9/11. Things after 9/11 and the Patriot Act, centralizing, police and law enforcement and military and all, the encroachment of Big Brother. It was on steroids after that. Lots of money being dumped into this. I would assume that this type of training is still going on, but it was open to pretty much anyone that, worked in kind of an emergency management, emergency services. Even hospitals could send like their security or their ER personnel and stuff like that, because they had it, for different areas. Military, they train similar types of stuff, chemical, nuclear, and biological terrorism, that type of stuff. So there's actually a lot of people that have gone through these two different types of training, and certain ones are a little different, but it's all kind of the basic same principle. But anyways, I wanted to point out that be wary of the churches. And again, I'm not saying don't go to church, but if your church is doing something like that or considering doing something like that, I could easily see greater ramifications of that. If you're a prepper or a gun owner or something like that, maybe your church knows about it, maybe some of your friends, maybe their deacon or pastor stuff. Does that kind of information get transferred along up the line? I don't know. I could see its potential to. Any of you that have served, whether it's military, law enforcement, or some type of fashion like that, you're going to know that they're really good at convincing people of what they want. They're good at that kind of brainwashing. So I could see a lot of potential for danger there, and this has been several years ago that I went through that training, so I'm sure it's gotten worse. I got on their DHS's website, and all that information is still on there. The programs, they've expanded them, offer new things for faith-based organizations and stuff. So anyways, remember, FEMA camps won't always look like a FEMA camp. Alright, stay prepared, be an old Boy Scout and be prepared. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for all the subscriptions to the channel, the sharing, the liking, the commenting. I love it. I'm at a point now that it's getting to be so much that I'm having a hard time keeping up with every comment. So if I don't respond, it doesn't mean I don't like you. It's just, a week ago it was maybe 2 or 3 a day, and in the last couple of days it's been several hundred a day. It's exploding, and it's fun. But I'm having a hard time keeping up on just responding to everyone, so I'm probably missing a lot of people, and I apologize for that. But thank you, guys and gals. This is all about you, and I'll just keep putting out the information until you stop listening. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.